Hey guys, tonight we're stepping into a world of velvet drapes, flickering gas lamps, and the faint hiss of a coal fire that never quite keeps the chill away. Imagine a towering Victorian townhouse, its bricks darkened by soot, its windows framed in lace that hasn't been properly white since Queen Victoria herself frowned approvingly upon it. You stand at the doorstep, umbrella dripping, heart beating faster. This looks beautiful from the outside, romantic even, but give it 24 hours, and you'll be praying for a shower that isn't shared with every draft in London. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Tell me in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is in your corner of the world. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The door opens with a groan, not a gentle creak, but the kind of moan that sounds vaguely alive. You step inside, umbrella dripping coal, flecked rainwater onto marble tiles that seem to recoil from your modern shoes. A maid rushes forward, eyes down, posture perfect, and takes your coat. She doesn't make eye contact. That's your first lesson here, class is an invisible wall, and you've just walked into the wrong side of it without realizing. The air smells thick, like burnt toast and damp velvet. Every breath carries the ghost of coal smoke. You cough politely, but it's useless. The suit scratches at your throat like a tiny, persistent cat. The grand hallway stretches ahead, lined with portraits of severe ancestors, each painted to look as if they disapprove of your posture. One even seems to follow your gaze, the eyes glinting in the gaslight. You hear the tick of a grandfather clock, precise and relentless, counting down your stay in this elegant prison. The wallpaper, green and gold, glows faintly under the lamps. It's beautiful until you remember the rumor. Victorian green dye often contained arsenic. You take a step back, deciding that leaning against the wall might not be worth dying for. Your host appears, a gentleman with mutton, chopped whiskers, and a waistcoat that seems to hold its own opinions. He says, with a polite stiffness that suggests warmth has been rationed since 1842. His accent is crisp, his handshake clammy. You murmur a thank you, trying not to stare at the odd sheen on his wallpaper or the slightly melted candle by the door. The sound of the outside world fades. The clop of horses, the occasional shout of a newsboy, and you're swallowed by the house's heartbeat. Footsteps echo above, muffled voices whisper behind doors, and the faint clang of metal tells you someone's already tending the fires. This place runs like clockwork, but you can't shake the sense that you've become part of a larger, rehearsed routine. You're led through a sitting room that seems almost too dark. Curtains drawn, the gas lamps flicker with a trembling yellow pulse. The furniture is heavy, carved within an inch of its life, and every flat surface is covered in something. Lace, porcelain, paperweights. The Victorians hated emptiness. Even their silence came decorated. Your host insists you sit, and a maid pours tea from a silver pot. You reach for the cup and notice her hands, red, raw, and trembling slightly. You offer a soft, thank you, but she only nods. Politeness is her duty, not her choice. You sip the tea, it's strong and slightly metallic, the taste of boiled pipes and overworked kettles. Outside, the wind rattles the windows. The coal fire hisses and spits sparks like it's arguing with itself. You glance toward the hearth and spot the iron grate blackened with age. The room's warmth is deceptive. It's not cozy but oppressive, the heat clinging to your clothes and hair. Victorians lived surrounded by smoke and pride, and you're starting to see why both left stains. You rise to stretch, wandering toward a side table filled with curiosities. A taxidermied bird mid-flight, a seashell, a tiny ivory figurine of a man wrestling a serpent. Collecting was an art form back then, a sign of learning and control over the world. But to your modern eyes, it feels a little like a museum curated by someone with insomnia and a god complex. As you peer closer, your host launches into a monologue about the glories of industry. You nod, smile, and try not to breathe too deeply. The Victorians truly believed progress was an unstoppable force, though historians still argue whether that optimism masked a deep cultural anxiety. After all, everything was changing: science, faith, society. Yet, as the gas lamp flickers, you can't help noticing how much of that progress smells like coal tar. A soft cough escapes you. The host chuckles. "Our London air," he says proudly, as if smog were a sign of achievement. You remember reading that in 1858, the Thames stank so badly Parliament had to shut down. The Great Stink, they called it. You suspect this house bottled some of it as a keepsake. When you glance up again, you catch sight of a small, brass device on the mantel. A barometer, perhaps, or some mysterious measuring tool. Your host notices your curiosity. "A marvel of modern science," he says. You nod again, half listening. Victorians adored gadgets: thermometers, pressure gauges, clockwork toys. Science was fashionable even if few understood it. A servant announces that your room is ready. You rise, still coughing softly, and follow her up the staircase. The carpet muffles your steps, but every board beneath sighs and groans. The house itself feels alive, its bones expanding and settling with the heat. The banister is polished to a slick sheen. Beeswax and elbow grease. The invisible fingerprints of someone else's labor. At the landing, you pause to admire a large stained glass window. The colors, deep reds, ocean blues, glow eerily from the dim light outside. You step closer and notice the glass ripples unevenly. That's how you can tell it's old. Molten glass in the 19th century flowed over time, making even straight lines appear slightly drunk. The maid opens your room. It's large, filled with dark wood furniture and the smell of lavender, trying desperately to hide mildew. Heavy drapes hang from the ceiling like funeral cloth. A single candle flickers on the dressing table. You want to switch on a light, but of course, there isn't one. She points out the washstand, the jug of water, and the chamber pot beneath the bed. You try to thank her again, but she's already backing out with a small curtsy. The door closes softly behind her, and for the first time you're alone. You wander around, touching everything. The wallpaper, floral, slightly peeling, has that same faint green hue. Arsenic again, perhaps. The bed is enormous, its mattress a strange mix of straw and feathers. You sit down and immediately sink several inches. It smells faintly of damp wool and centuries-old sleep. From outside, a distant foghorn moans. Somewhere below, you hear the clatter of dishes, a muffled laugh quickly shushed. The world feels both alive and sealed away. You can't help thinking how hard it must have been to live in such confined beauty. Everything ornate, everything formal. Even the dust seems arranged politely. You pull off your coat and wander to the window. The glass is thick and cloudy, distorting the gaslights on the street into soft hollows. You open it an inch, craving fresh air, and are rewarded with a blast of cold wind and soot. You close it again quickly, coughing. Below, a hansom cab rattles past. The driver shouts at a pedestrian, and the horse leaves a steaming reminder of its presence on the cobbles. Life outside moves with purpose. Life inside this house feels like a slow exhale. As you move to draw the curtains, you notice a small painting above the bed. A pastoral scene, rolling hills, and sheep grazing. But the sky is oddly dark, almost bruised. It's strangely comforting, though you can't say why. Maybe because it reminds you that even beauty in this era carried a hint of melancholy. A knock interrupts your thoughts. It's the maid again, bringing a small jug of hot water for washing. You smile awkwardly, realizing she's been climbing stairs for hours. Her hands tremble slightly as she sets it down. You thank her, and this time, she dares a half smile before vanishing again into the corridor's shadows. You stare into the basin's steaming water. It's already turning grey from soot particles drifting through the air. You dip your hands anyway, wincing at the heat. The Victorians loved ritual, and this nightly ablution was one of them. You wonder how anyone stayed clean in a world so coated with grime. The fire in the corner pops, sending a small puff of ash toward the rug. You watch it settle, tiny flakes of black against crimson wool. You think of how every breath you take here would have been laced with particles of soot, candle smoke, and sometimes even arsenic dust. And you realize the Victorians didn't just live among toxins, they decorated with them. As you finally sit back on the bed, the house settles too, as though exiling with you. Somewhere a clock chimes 8. The evening has only begun, but you already feel the weight of the place pressing in. The portraits, the furniture, the endless ticking. It's all so controlled, so carefully arranged, that you start to miss the mess of modern life. But there's no turning back. Tomorrow morning will come, cold and grey, and with it the rest of your 24-hour ordeal. For now, the house hums quietly, waiting for you to dream in a century that never truly rested. You wake up shivering. Not the cozy, sleepy kind of shiver, but the "why is my soul freezing" kind. The first thing you see is your breath clouding in front of you. The second is the thin, grey light filtering through heavy curtains that feel more like tomb coverings than window dressings. Welcome to morning in a Victorian house. No central heating, no thermostat, just a small fire that died sometime around 3 a.m. and a faint smell of smoke that's somehow both comforting and depressing. You sit up, the bedsheets cold and stiff, the air so dry it stings your nose. You tug on the blanket for warmth, and the movement stirs up a puff of dust that makes you sneeze, loudly. Somewhere in the house, you hear the soft shuffle of a servant's feet. There's always someone awake here, though you rarely see them. It's like living in a haunted hotel where the ghosts still scrub the floors. You swing your legs over the side of the bed and instantly regret it. The floorboards are colder than betrayal. You hop toward the rug like you're crossing a frozen pond, teeth chattering, muttering, "People actually lived like this?" Under your breath, your eyes land on the porcelain jug and basin from last night, the water now chilled into something between liquid and slush. You steel yourself, splash your face, and nearly scream. The cold hits like a slap from history itself. Victorians called this invigorating. You call it trauma in liquid form. There's no toothbrush, of course, just a small tin of gritty powder and a stiff, bristled brush that looks like it's been used to polish furniture. You dip it in water and begin scrubbing, tasting soap, salt and faint despair. Mint wouldn't be introduced into toothpaste until later in the century, so what you're brushing with tastes vaguely of chalk and regret. The maid enters without knocking, eyes politely averted. She carries a coal scuttle and begins poking at the fireplace, coaxing it back to life with quick, efficient movements. You say, "Good morning," and she curtsies without a word. For a moment you imagine her day, up before dawn, hauling coal, lighting fires in every bedroom before the masters stir. By now, she's probably on her 5th or 6th hearth. "Breakfast will be ready downstairs shortly, sir," she whispers. You nod, and she vanishes again, leaving behind the faint smell of ashes and soap. You glance at the chamber pot, tucked discreetly beneath the bed. It's a relic of necessity, porcelain painted with delicate blue flowers, as if prettiness could distract from purpose. You realize that's the morning routine, no plumbing, no flush, no privacy. You try to imagine balancing it with grace in candlelight, hoping not to spill on your nightshirt. Suddenly, your appreciation for modern bathrooms skyrockets. When the fire finally crackles to life, You feel brave enough to dress. The wardrobe looms like a cathedral, filled with layers upon layers of fabric. You pull out a stiff white shirt, a waistcoat, and trousers so high-waisted they could double as a chest brace. The collar alone feels like it's plotting your slow suffocation. You start with socks, thick, itchy wool, and then the shirt, which buttons all the way up to your chin. It's like assembling armor, one piece at a time. The air stays freezing, so every layer feels like survival. You can see now why Victorian fainting couches were popular. People probably passed out from the sheer exhaustion of getting dressed. Historians still argue whether Victorians were obsessed with modesty out of morality or just coldness. Either way, the fashion rules were brutal. For men, that meant heavy wool suits year-round. For women, it meant corsets so tight they rearranged internal organs. You think of all those portraits where people look serious. It's probably because they couldn't breathe. A small bell rings faintly through the floorboards. That's the signal for breakfast. You make your way out, opening the door into a dim hallway that smells faintly of boiled cabbage and dust. The walls are lined with more portraits, each with faces so stern they could curdle milk. A man in uniform stares at you like he knows you didn't polish your boots properly. You follow the narrow staircase down, careful not to trip. The steps are steep, the railings slightly sticky with old varnish. At the bottom, a faint warmth wafts from the kitchen. For a moment, it's almost pleasant. Then the smell hits you fully: coal smoke, old bacon grease, and something slightly sour that might be porridge or might be despair. The kitchen is a cavern of metal and steam. Pots bubble on the stove, and a harried cook barks orders at a scullery maid. Everything glistens with heat and soot. You're handed a plate of food. Porridge, greyish in colour, with a texture best described as a double cement. There's a bit of jam, probably homemade, probably from last year. You take a cautious bite. It tastes faintly of smoke and salt, like the air itself decided to join in. You glance around. The servants don't eat here. Their food comes later, if there's time. Their world is separate, even though they move like shadows around the edges of yours. The class divide isn't just financial, it's architectural. 2 staircases, 2 doors, 2 lives. You're ushered into the dining room, where your host and his wife await. They greet you with polite smiles and stiff necks. "Did you sleep well?" she asks. You hesitate, then lie. "Quite well. Thank you." The dining room is a spectacle of excess. Mahogany table, silver cutlery, and a faint smell of coal mixed with lavender polish. The windows are so thick with grime, you can't tell if it's morning or just another shade of grey. You sip weak tea, which at least warms your hands, and listen as your host discusses the wonders of modern sanitation. You resist the urge to laugh. He's referring to the installation of a new household water closet, a rare luxury in the 1870s. You nod politely, pretending not to know that early plumbing often connected straight into cesspits. "Progress," he says proudly. You glance at your tea and wonder if that's what it tastes like. Outside, a carriage clatters past, the sound muffled by thick drapes. Somewhere, a bell tolls the hour. The city never truly sleeps, it just changes gears. You catch a faint reflection of yourself in a silver teapot. Hair slightly disheveled, eyes bleary, the faint smudge of soot across your cheek. You look like someone surviving a camping trip inside a coal mine. Your hostess begins talking about etiquette, how even breakfast has rules. No elbows, no loud chewing, and heaven forbid you mention anything vulgar, like digestion or bathrooms. Victorians could discuss empire and mortality at the table, but never their bowels. You sip your tea, careful to avoid scandal. She asks if you'll be joining them later for a stroll through the garden. You agree, though you've already caught a glimpse of it. Small, smoky, and framed by soot, blackened hedges. Still, you nod politely. It's what a guest must do. As the meal drags on, you start to notice something: the silence between conversations. It's thick, almost sacred. The only sounds are the clink of silverware and the occasional polite cough. You realize how much noise modern life makes. Phones, music, the hum of electricity. Here, even time moves quietly, like it's wearing gloves. After breakfast, you're shown back to your room to freshen up. You stare again at the basin and decide against another round of ice water torture. Instead, you wander to the window and watch the chimney smoke curl upward. Across the street, a milkman in a cap shouts to a customer, his horse steaming in the cold. Everything outside feels alive but grimy, like life here requires grit and a good immune system. You catch sight of a woman sweeping her stoop with mechanical precision, her dress spotless, despite the suit falling from above. Respectability, that's the word of the age. Everyone here is performing it. Every movement, every outfit, every polite "good morning" is part of a larger, exhausting theater. You lean back, feeling the cold wall through your shirt. Somewhere in the house, the maid is still climbing stairs, the fire is still crackling, and the day is only beginning. You wonder how anyone lived like this for decades without losing their minds, or at least their patience. Maybe that's the secret of the Victorians. They survived by pretending everything was fine. The smoke, character. The smell, authenticity. The discomfort, virtue. You look around your perfectly uncomfortable room and think, maybe that's why this still fascinates us. It was miserable, yes, but beautifully so. You tug the drapes open a little more, letting in a grey shard of daylight, and watch the dust swirl through it like tiny ghosts of coal dust and soap. It's strangely peaceful, in a melancholy sort of way. But as you catch sight of your reflection again, rumpled, tired, slightly ashen, you realize it's only been a few hours, and already the Victorian house is winning. You shuffle down the narrow staircase, one hand trailing along the polished banister that gleams faintly under weak daylight. It's mid-morning now, and the house hums with restrained purpose. Muffled footsteps, the distant clang of a pot, a faint clatter of china. Your breath fogs in front of you, and even though the fire downstairs has been stoked, the chill clings like a damp shawl you can't shrug off. The smell hits first. Not one smell, but a confusing symphony of them. Coal smoke, boiled milk, toasted bread, something vaguely sweet, and the sharp tang of metal. You follow your nose through a maze of corridors until you reach the kitchen. This is no cozy modern space. It's a battlefield of heat and ash. A coal range roars like a small dragon, sending waves of heat that fight with cold drafts slipping through stone walls. Copper pots hang from hooks, their undersides blackened with soot. The air is thick, heavy, alive with steam and grease. You cough softly, earning a quick side eye from the cook. A large woman with forearms like tree trunks and an expression that could silence thunder. Best keep back from the stove, love. She mutters without looking up. You'll melt your face off if you're not careful. You thank her, though you're not sure she meant it as advice or a warning. The scullery maid, younger and red-eyed from the smoke, is scrubbing dishes in cold grey water. Her sleeves are rolled past her elbows, skin raw and blotched. You notice her hands trembling as she wrings out a rag. She can't be older than 16. A butler appears, precise as a clock. Breakfast is to be taken in the dining room, he says, his tone clipped, eyes fixed somewhere over your shoulder. You realize he's pretending not to notice you've wandered below stairs. A guest in the servants' world is as out of place as a pigeon at a tea party. Still, your curiosity wins. You take a step closer to the stove, and that's when the smoke thickens. The cook opens the oven door, releasing a black cloud that tastes like burnt coal and despair. She waves it off with her apron. Mind the suit, she mutters. Gets into everything. She's not exaggerating. You can feel it coating your tongue, a dry bitterness that lingers. Everything here smells faintly of smoke. Bread, butter, jam, even the air itself. You can almost taste the century's lungs. Historians still argue whether London's constant smog shortened the average lifespan, or simply made everyone look fashionable in grayscale. A footman brings a tray laden with covered dishes, and the cook lifts the lids one by one. Scrambled eggs, toast, sausage sounds ordinary until you see the sheen of grey on everything. Coal dust has settled like seasoning. You think back to last night's soot, stained tea, and realize this is just how it was. You couldn't escape the Industrial Revolution, not even in your breakfast. The butler clears his throat impatiently. The family is waiting, he reminds the cook. And guests. He looks at you when he says it, but not quite at you. You're a complication in his routine, something that doesn't belong. You get the sense that this entire house runs on invisible rules, and every deviation threatens the fragile balance. You follow the tray upstairs again, half expecting to collapse from the rising heat followed by the sudden cold. The dining room feels like another world. Polished, quiet, smelling faintly of violets and civility. The transition is jarring. Below stairs chaos, upstairs calm. You take your seat while your host folds his napkin like a man conducting a symphony of etiquette. "Aye," he says with a smile that doesn't quite reach his eyes. "Our morning repast." The maid sets your plate in front of you. Toasted bread, slightly blackened. Sausages glistening with fat. Porridge, pale and steaming. You bite cautiously. It tastes of salt and smoke again, though now with the faint addition of iron. Perhaps from the pans, perhaps from the air. Fine day. Your host says, though the view outside shows nothing but fog and faintly dripping gutters. "The air has improved lately," he adds proudly. You nearly laugh. Improved. The fog is so thick you can't tell where the sky ends and the chimney smoke begins. His wife, delicate and pale, takes a sip of tea. "Our doctor says a brisk morning walk clears the lungs," she says. You imagine coughing up soot halfway down the street and decide to take her word for it. You glance toward the sideboard, where a decanter of milk sits beside a covered dish. The milk looks faintly grey. Coal again, probably. The Victorians lived in a constant balance between elegance and toxicity. They prized whiteness. White bread, white linen, white skin. But their world was anything but clean. Your host launches into conversation about the railway expansion, his voice warming with enthusiasm. "Marvellous innovation," he declares. "Brings civilization to the farthest corners of the country." You nod politely, resisting the urge to mention that train travel was noisy, filthy, and often deadly. Historians still debate whether the Industrial Revolution liberated the average Briton or just gave them new ways to cough. A servant quietly refills your cup. The tea smells stronger this time. Black bitter, comforting. You notice her eyes flick to the window, just for a second, as if she's measuring how much sunlight is left before her next round of duties. You realize she'll probably skip breakfast altogether, grabbing a crust of bread in the scullery while polishing the family's silver. When the meal ends, your host dabs his mouth with a napkin and rises. "We'll take some air, I think." A short walk in the square. You follow obediently. The sound of your chair scraping the floor, a small act of rebellion in the otherwise choreographed quiet. The moment you open the front door, the city hits you full in the face. The air is thick with fog and smoke, a sour cocktail of coal fumes, manure, and something metallic, like pennies and ash. You cough involuntarily, eyes watering. Your host breathes it in deeply, smiling. Bracing, isn't it? Bracing is one word for it. Fatal, perhaps, is another. You glance down the street. Rows of identical houses stretch into the haze, chimneys puffing like overworked lungs. The cobblestones gleam slick with drizzle, and a thin layer of grime coats everything. The carriages, the railings, even the dogs. A street sweeper moves slowly, pushing muck into the gutter where it joins the rest of London's sins. The noise is constant. Hooves, shouting, distant whistles. Somewhere, a woman sells flowers, her hands red from cold. Children dart between carts, their laughter sharp and brittle like glass. It's oddly alive, chaotic and grim at once. You walk a few steps and feel your shoes stick slightly. You look down. Horse manure, mixed with who knows what. A passing cart splashes through a puddle, sending grey water up your trousers. The driver tips his hat cheerfully, and you can't even be mad. It's just how mornings go here. Your host points proudly toward the gas lamps lining the street. A triumph of engineering, he says. Safer than candles. You glance at the flickering flame inside one lamp, remembering stories of explosions caused by leaks. You decide not to mention that. By the time you return to the house, your lungs ache and your face feels grimy. You wipe at your cheek and see a smudge of black on your hand. Victorian London. Come for the charm, stay for the particulate matter. Back inside, the house feels strangely warm now. Or maybe you've just gone numb. The cook's voice echoes faintly from below, scolding someone about burnt bread. Somewhere, a piano starts playing softly. A gentle waltz that seems out of place in this gritty world. You sink into an armchair near the fire, grateful for its reluctant warmth. The smoke from the coal mingles with the lingering fog that clings to your clothes. It's everywhere. This suit, on your skin, in your throat, even under your nails. The Victorian house doesn't just surround you, it gets inside you. You close your eyes for a moment, trying to rest, but the smell keeps you awake. The fire crackles, the clock ticks, and you wonder, not for the first time, how anyone managed to live like this and still call it progress. Then again, maybe that was the trick. The Victorians believed discomfort was moral. To suffer a bit meant you were civilized, refined, properly English. And as your eyes sting and your throat scratches, you begin to understand. It wasn't that they didn't notice the smoke. They just convinced themselves it smelled like success. You wake from a shallow nap with the faintest ache behind your eyes, a kind of coal-scented fatigue that feels baked into the furniture itself. The fire has dwindled again, leaving the room dim and somber. Dust drifts lazily through a shaft of grey light that manages to sneak past the curtains, and for a moment, you forget what century you're in. The stillness feels ancient. Then, you notice something that yanks you right back to Victorian reality. Your clothes. Or rather, your lack of proper ones. It's time to dress for the day. And if the Victorians knew anything, it was how to turn a simple act of getting dressed into a full contact sport. You pull open the wardrobe. Inside is a lineup of garments so stiff and formal they seem capable of standing on their own. Starched shirts, waistcoats, trousers cut with military precision, and a cravat that looks more like a puzzle than a piece of fabric. You hesitate before touching them, as if they might bite. Dress, you whisper to yourself. How hard can it be? Turns out, very. The first shirt is crisp to the point of hostility. You slide your arms in, and the fabric rasps against your skin like sandpaper. Each button feels designed for someone with the hands of a jeweler, not a living human being. The collar rises high enough to pinch the underside of your jaw. It's less clothing, more medieval restraint device. Next comes the waistcoat. Tight, hot, unforgiving. Then the cravat, a long strip of fabric that must be twisted, folded, and knotted with precision. You try twice, end up choking yourself once, and finally manage a version that looks respectable if you squint. You glance in the mirror and see a stranger. Formal, composed, slightly strangled. Historians still argue whether Victorian fashion was about elegance or control. You can see the case for both. These clothes announce order and discipline. but they also remind you to sit straight, breathe carefully, and never relax. Maybe that's the point. Downstairs, you hear the faint rustle of skirts and the clink of teacups. It's the household coming to life again. The women's laughter sounds delicate, but strained, like porcelain teetering on the edge of a shelf. You wonder how long it takes them to get dressed. Curiosity wins. You make your way down the hallway, where the housemaid is carrying a basket of freshly ironed linens. She moves quickly, eyes averted, murmuring an apology as she passes. You catch a glimpse of her hands, burned slightly from the iron, and the faint outline of stay marks under her collar. You can't imagine the number of hours she spends pressing clothes you'll ruin in half a day. The lady of the house, meanwhile, is already dressed to perfection. She greets you from the parlor with a polite smile that suggests she's practiced it for decades. Her gown is an architectural marvel, layers of silk, lace, and whalebone. You can practically hear it creak when she moves. "Isn't it lovely this morning?" she says, though the air still smells faintly of soot and cabbage. You nod and compliment her dress, because that's what etiquette demands. Her face softens. "Ah, thank you. It took my maid nearly an hour to lace me properly. Poor thing, her fingers must ache." You glance at her tiny waist and think yes, they probably do. The corset, her silent armor, draws her midsection into impossible proportions. The fabric gleams faintly under the gaslight, and you realize this isn't just clothing. It's discipline. It's status. It's pain worn beautifully. "Fashion," she says, noticing your stare, is the outward expression of inner refinement. You want to tell her that your inner refinement is currently gasping for air inside a cravat, but you just smile politely. She offers to show you the morning room, and you follow, careful not to trip over the edge of a rug that probably predates electricity. The room is bright, or at least brighter than the others, filled with lace curtains and potted ferns. Victorians adored plants. They believed greenery was proof of moral health. You suspect it was also a convenient way to hide the smell of damp plaster. She gestures toward a sewing table. "I spend most mornings here," she says proudly. A lady must occupy herself usefully. On the table lie spools of thread, embroidery hoops, and a small mountain of handkerchiefs. You wonder how many hours have been stitched into these tiny squares of linen. It's an art, yes, but also a prison of politeness. Decorating fabric, because you're not allowed to do much else. The lady picks up her needle again, the tip glinting in the weak light. "Do you embroider?" she asks. "Not since I was forced to patch my own jeans." You reply without thinking. She looks momentarily confused but smiles anyway. You take a seat by the window and watch the street below. Children run by in tattered coats. A milkman delivers bottles, his cart wheels leaving streaks of grey in the slush. A gentleman passes with a top hat tilted just so, his gloved hand raised in greeting to a woman stepping out of a carriage. Every movement outside is wrapped in ritual. Even their discomfort is dignified. The lady speaks softly while she sews. "My husband insists we follow the latest fashion. Last year's sleeves were quite wide, you see, and now, well, now they must be tighter. Progress, they say." You nod, thinking about how much of this so-called progress involves pain. "Of course," she adds, lowering her voice. "Some say these corsets cause fainting, but I don't believe it. It's merely poor constitution." You smile politely again. You've read enough history to know the truth. Some women actually had ribs removed to achieve the perfect silhouette. Fashion was not just expensive, it was anatomical warfare. Historians still debate whether corsetry was purely oppressive or a form of feminine control within a restrictive world. You watch her stitch tiny roses onto fabric and realize it's both. Beauty and bondage, sewn together one thread at a time. She finishes her work with a sigh. There now, she says. Would you like to see the dressing room? My maid will be preparing for laundry day. You follow her up another narrow staircase into a smaller, warmer room filled with steam and soap. Two maids are already at work, scrubbing collars, wringing linen, hanging garments to dry near the fire. The smell of starch and heat fills your lungs. One girl wipes her forehead with the back of her hand, leaving a streak of ash. You watch as she irons a shirt collar, her movements precise, almost reverent. The iron hisses when it meets the damp fabric, sending up a cloud of steam that smells faintly metallic. This isn't just laundry, it's survival. The lady notices your curiosity. They're quite skilled, aren't they? I could never do what they do. You don't doubt it. The rhythm of their work is hypnotic scrub. Wring, press, fold. Over and over, like a quiet heartbeat beneath the house's grandeur. You think about your own morning routines, hot showers, soft fabrics, tea, shirts you can put on in seconds. Here dressing is ceremony. Every garment an act of effort and endurance. You feel like an imposter in this world of starch and soot, a time traveler wearing someone else's skin. As you step back into the hallway, a sudden breeze sneaks through the window frame, carrying the smell of smoke again. It follows you like a reminder. No matter how polished the surface, the dirt always finds a way in. You pause at the landing, tugging at your collar. The stiff fabric bites your neck, leaving a faint red line. You smile grimly at your reflection in the hallway mirror, a parody of Victorian grace. Behind you, the lady's voice drifts, faintly. One must always appear proper, no matter the discomfort. You straighten your posture automatically, the way she does. The weight of fabric, expectation, and history presses down all at once. For a fleeting second, you understand what it must have felt like to live in this world, trapped inside beauty, bound by manners, gasping for air, and pretending it's grace. You make your way down the hallway again, the floorboards creaking like reluctant confidence beneath your boots. The smell of coal, wax, and something faintly metallic still hangs in the air, but now another scent joins it, food. Or at least, the ghost of food. It's breakfast time in the Victorian household, and you're about to discover that mealtime isn't just about eating. It's about status, silence, and occasionally, mild poisoning. Downstairs, the dining room glows faintly golden from the fire's reflection on silverware. Every surface gleams as if the servants have been polishing it since dawn, which you realize they probably have. A long oak table dominates the room, covered with a linen cloth so heavily starched it could probably stand on its own. The master of the house is already seated, newspaper folded beside his plate. His sideburns are immaculately trimmed, his expression that of a man who hasn't smiled before breakfast since 1843. The lady of the house joins him, moving gracefully despite her corset's quiet rebellion. You're invited to sit. At the far end, of course. A footman glides in silently with a silver tray. On it, steaming dishes that seem promising at first glance: bacon, eggs, toast. You reach for the latter, only to notice it's nearly blackened. The butter beside it, hard and pale, glistens like wax. You take a cautious bite anyway. It tastes faintly of smoke and regret. Victorian breakfasts, you quickly realize, were about display, not flavor. The master clears his throat. Tea, he asks, gesturing to a pot so ornate it could be mistaken for a small trophy. Yes, please, you answer, though your voice comes out hoarse. The lady pours it delicately, her hand steady. The liquid gleams amber in your cup, but the first sip burns, not with temperature, but with tannin. Bitter, strong, unforgiving. You swallow politely and cough only once. Historians still argue whether Victorian tea culture was a genuine pleasure or a daily endurance test. Judging by your mouth, it's both. Conversation drifts lazily across the table. The master discusses improvements to the local factory. Longer hours, better efficiency, fewer breaks. He speaks of it as though describing an orchestra, each worker another note in his grand composition of profit. You nod along, trying not to reveal your modern disgust. Meanwhile, the lady folds her napkin neatly, sighing. "I do worry about the smog, though," she says softly. "Even the roses in the garden are turning grey." "Progress has a cost," her husband replies. "And besides, the suit keeps the weeds down." You sip your tea again, wishing it were coffee, or perhaps an escape hatch. At the far wall, a grandfather clock ticks like a stern chaperone. You become acutely aware of every tiny sound, the clink of china, the soft rustle of skirts, the faint scrape of a fork against porcelain. The meal unfolds with quiet ceremony, as though any deviation from etiquette might summon Queen Victoria herself. You glance toward the servants' door, just in time to catch a fleeting scene, the kitchen beyond, chaotic and alive. The cook shouts orders, a boy hauls buckets of water, and the air looks thick with steam and flour. That's where the real life of the house thrums. Behind the walls, unseen but constant. After breakfast, the master departs for his business, top hat in place, boots polished to a mirror sheen. His departure is so smooth it's almost theatrical. The front door shuts with authority, and for a brief moment, silence reigns again. Then comes the clatter from below, breakfast cleanup. You decide to follow the noise, slipping through a narrow service passage into the kitchen. Immediately, you're swallowed by warmth, smell, and motion. It's like stepping into another world. The cook, a broad woman with suit on her apron, barely glances at you. "Mind your feet, love. Floor's wet." You nod quickly, stepping aside as a scullery maid rushes past, carrying a bucket of grey water. She looks about 14, her hands red and raw from scrubbing. You watch her pour the bucket into a drain, then start again with another basin of dishes. The rhythm is relentless. "Hard morning?" you ask gently. She snorts. "Aren't they all?" You smile, but she's already gone, stacking plates in an endless tower of exhaustion. The cook stirs a pot of something bubbling, porridge, perhaps. The steam fogs the windows, dripping back down like rain. "The master's off early," she mutters, half to herself. "Means I'll get no rest till supper's on." You glance around. The kitchen is both impressive and miserable. Brass pans hang in perfect rows, gleaming from constant polishing. A great black range dominates one wall, the fire roaring like a beast that never sleeps. Everything smells faintly of coal, onions, and overwork, and the heat, it's suffocating. Your collar starts to wilt, and sweat beads at your temple. "Do you ever get a break?" you ask. The cook laughs, a sound like a rolling pin striking dough. "Break? That's for people with money, dearie." You smile awkwardly, then notice a small tin of something near the stove, dripping. You recall reading about this once. It's fat saved from roasted meats, used for frying or spreading on bread. You shudder slightly. The Victorians never wasted anything, not even flavor at the expense of hygiene. A rat scurries along the far corner. You blink. The cook doesn't even react. "Don't bother naming him," she says dryly. "They don't live long." There's your quirky fact of the morning. Victorians didn't just have pests. They had armies of them. And they were so common that exterminators sometimes advertised with heroic titles like "Rat Catcher to Her Majesty." "Want a slice of toast?" The cook offers suddenly, gesturing to a rack near the fire. You hesitate. "Is it safe?" She smirks. "Depends on your stomach." You decline politely. Historians still debate whether the Victorian kitchen was a place of innovation or endurance. Gas stoves, refrigeration experiments, and the birth of mass food production all began here. But so did countless cases of food poisoning. Hygiene, as you can tell by the rat population, wasn't exactly prioritized. You step back into the hallway, your nostrils filled with smoke and grease, your mind spinning with the smell of effort. You realize now that the Victorian household wasn't a single organism. It was a hierarchy in motion, with comfort at the top and sweat trickling down every step. As you pass the pantry, you notice jars lined neatly on shelves. Preserves, pickles, and mysterious concoctions labeled in elegant cursive. One jar catches your eye, beef dripping, 1869. You can't help but imagine someone spooning that onto toast with pride. A joke bubbles up in your mind. Congratulations, you've invented edible regret. You stifle a laugh, because laughter doesn't fit here. Back upstairs, the air feels cooler, but heavier somehow. The faint echo of clattering dishes still carries up through the floorboards. A constant reminder that luxury has its cost, and it's usually paid by someone else's hands. You loosen your collar, finally allowing yourself to breathe. The morning has felt like an entire day already, and yet you've barely survived breakfast. You think back to your modern life, coffee pods, microwaves, and late night snacks, and realize how much of the Victorian day revolved around simply maintaining survival: heating, cleaning, dressing, eating. No wonder everyone looked so serious in their portraits. They were just tired. And you, already sweating in your collar, are starting to feel exactly the same way. By the time breakfast's ghost has faded from the air, the rest of the house has fully woken up. There's motion in every hallway now, quiet but constant, like the ticking of that grandfather clock magnified into human rhythm. The servants glide in and out of sight. The lady hums faintly from the morning room upstairs, and the fire crackles with the satisfaction of having survived another lighting. You stretch your shoulders, already chafing against your shirt collar, and wonder what exactly you're supposed to do with your day. Because in a Victorian house, leisure isn't freedom. It's a schedule, a performance of restraint, and for the working class, it's a rumor. You start with curiosity, a little exploration. The hallway smells of beeswax and damp wool, the scent of every passing coat captured in the wood. A portrait of an ancestor watches you with that glazed stare Victorians loved so much, solemn, expressionless, definitely judging your posture. You turn a corner and find the drawing room, a grand space that looks like it's waiting for company. Every chair is perfectly aligned. Every curtain hangs in deliberate folds. The air feels rehearsed, as though the room itself has been told to behave. You step inside. The carpet muffles your footsteps, and your eyes drift over the details: velvet upholstery, a pianoforte, stacks of sheet music, an impressive collection of taxidermy birds frozen in mid-flight. Victorians adored dead animals as decoration. It was beauty without movement, control disguised as elegance. Careful with that glass, a soft voice says behind you. It's the lady again, gliding into the room like a ghost in silk. Just looking, you reply. Of course. A home should be admired as well as lived in, she says. Then, almost wistfully, though we do rather more of the admiring, you nod, feeling that truth settle heavily in the air. She takes a seat on the settee and gestures for you to join her. You'll find that mornings in a proper household are for correspondence, she says. Letters, visiting cards, that sort of thing. You glance toward a small table stacked with paper, sealing wax, and an ornate pen. Writing letters, in this world, is like sending fragments of your soul through the postal system. Every loop and flourish matters. You sit down and pick up one of the envelopes. The paper feels thick, almost proud. Who are you writing to, you ask? Oh, anyone who requires a reply, she says with a small sigh. Social calls, charity events, condolences, invitations. It never ends. You realize this is her version of work. Endless, polite obligation. In the corner, a clock chimes 11. Somewhere below, the faint clatter of the scullery echoes again. The two worlds, upstairs grace and downstairs grind, run parallel but never touch. Historians still argue whether Victorian domestic life was truly peaceful or simply repressed. The evidence, sitting across from you with perfect posture, suggests both. She finishes a line on her letter and smiles faintly. Perhaps you'd like to take some air. The conservatory is pleasant this time of day. You agree instantly. Anything to breathe. The conservatory feels like a different planet. Warm, green, alive. Glass panes arch overhead, misted with condensation that drips occasionally onto the tiled floor. Ferns crowd every corner. Orchids bloom with impossible delicacy. You inhale deeply. Finally, air that doesn't taste like soot. But even here, there's tension. Every plant is meticulously arranged, trained up wires or into pots. Nature, too, must behave. A gardener crouches by the far wall, trimming leaves with shears. He looks up, briefly nods, then returns to work. You notice his hands are rough, earth embedded under his nails. Living proof that this green serenity is built on hard labor. Beautiful, isn't it? The lady says softly, joining you. It was my husband's idea. A little Eden in London. You glance at the glass roof streaked with grime, and the faint greyness beyond. Eden seems optimistic. Still, you smile. It's lovely, you say. Of course, she adds, lowering her voice conspiratorially. The heating bills are dreadful. You laugh. The first genuine sound of amusement you've made all day. She looks momentarily pleased, then drifts toward a shelf of potted herbs. They say a lady's virtue can be judged by her roses, she murmurs. I suppose mine are modest. You look closer. The roses are indeed struggling. Their leaves wilt slightly in the stale air. Victorian horticulture was as much status as science. A single exotic plant could cost as much as a servant's yearly wage. Imported by ship and kept alive only through obsessive care. You think of the gardeners tending these fragile lives daily, and it feels metaphorical. The entire house is a garden of appearances. You linger among the plants until the air grows thick again, then return indoors, where the stillness resumes its grip. The afternoon begins to settle, slow and heavy. You can feel time drag its feet here. There's no television, no hum of appliances, no buzz of notifications. Only the occasional clip of boots in the hallway, and the sigh of the house adjusting to its own weight. You wander into the library next. It's dimly lit, the curtains half drawn to protect the books from sunlight. Rows upon rows of leather, bound volumes line the shelves, their spines stamped with gold lettering. The moral life of the Englishman. Domestic etiquette simplified, the principles of coal. You pick one up. The pages smell like dust and candle smoke. You flip it open and find a hand. Written note on the inside cover. To think correctly is to behave correctly. You groan quietly. What an exhausting century. A joke slips through your mind. In the Victorian age, even your bookshelf judged you. You browse further, spotting titles on phrenology, the science of skull reading, and wonder how many heads were politely examined over tea in this very room. Historians still debate whether Victorians truly believed these pseudosciences or simply used them to justify social hierarchies. Either way, it's unsettling. You'd sink into a chair near the fire. It's surprisingly comfortable, but the silence that follows feels almost too thick, like the house resents your relaxation. Your eyelids grow heavy, lulled by the rhythmic tick of the mantel clock and the faint scratch of a quill in the next room. A short nap, you think? Just a moment. When you wake, the light has changed, pale and slanting. Dust motes float lazily in the sunbeam, cutting across the carpet. Somewhere, a bell rings 3 times. Tea hour. You rise, straighten your cravat, which by now feels like it's plotting your demise, and follow the faint chatter toward the parlor. The smell of baked goods drifts through the air. Buttery, sweet, inviting. At last, something good. The table is set with precision tiered trays of scones. cucumber sandwiches, and delicate pastries that look too perfect to eat. The lady pours tea with practiced grace, and you notice this time the brew is milder, mercifully drinkable. "You must try the seed cake," she insists. You do. It's dense, fragrant with caraway, and surprisingly pleasant. For once, something in this house doesn't taste like smoke or starch. As you eat, she talks about the latest gossip, a cousin's engagement, a neighbor's scandal, the Queen's rumored new carriage design. It's idle chatter, but it fills the air like the ticking of a comfortable clock. Of course, she adds with a knowing smile, appearances are everything. One must never let the neighbors think one's life is anything less than divine. You smile thinly, thinking about the servants toiling just beyond the door, about the smoke, stained walls, the gas fumes, the endless cycle of cleaning and dressing. Divine is one word for it. Delusional is another. But you nod, sip your tea, and play along. That's what you do here. Perform. The conversation drifts, the fire pops softly, and the air begins to cool as the afternoon sun fades. For the first time all day, you feel the strange calm of Victorian routine settling into your bones. Predictable. Controlled. Almost soothing. Until you realize you're starting to accept it. You shake the thought away. You're not meant to belong here. But the house, creaking softly as the servants light the lamps, seems to whisper otherwise. By the time the lamps are lit, and the last rays of daylight have turned the windows into dull mirrors, you realize that the house has two entirely different personalities. One for day, one for night. During the daylight hours, everything is visible, structured, hierarchical. But after dark, the edges blur. The air grows heavier. The firelight flickers across wallpaper that seems to move when you're not watching, and the house feels less like a home and more like something alive. Breathing, creaking, dreaming in gaslight. You make your way down the dim corridor, following the glow of wall sconces. The flickering flames inside glass globes hiss faintly. The air smells of oil and iron. The unmistakable scent of a gas-lit evening. Gaslight was one of the great triumphs of Victorian modernity, or so the pamphlets of the time proclaimed. A marvel of civilization. A revolution in domestic comfort. What they didn't mention was that it sometimes leaked, sometimes exploded, and occasionally killed you quietly while you slept. You pause beneath one lamp. The flame dances behind the glass like it's trying to escape. You can hear a faint whispering hiss. The gas escaping through tiny brass valves. It's both beautiful and unnerving, like watching a tame dragon breathe. You can almost taste the air now, faintly metallic, faintly wrong. Historians still argue whether the headaches and fatigue Victorians often complained of came from overwork or chronic gas poisoning. You're starting to form your own opinion. Downstairs, a servant passes silently carrying a candlestick. Yes, even with gaslight, they still use candles. For corners the pipes don't reach. She murmurs when she notices your puzzled look. Her voice is small, wary. And for comfort. The gaslight makes people look ill. You glance at her face, pale in the flicker. She's right. The shadows it casts are sharp and strange, turning features hollow and eyes a little haunted. This was progress, yes, but progress with consequences. The lady of the house appears again, gliding like a ghost through the doorway. "Ah, you found the evening glow," she says softly, smoothing a fold in her skirt. "Isn't it wonderful? So bright, so civilized." You nod politely, resisting the urge to cough. "Of course," she continues, "I never allow the lamps in the bedrooms. My husband says they dry the air terribly, and perhaps also because open gas jets near fabric, curtains, and hair are, well, a known hazard. You remember reading about that once. The number of fires, started by women's dresses, catching light from open flames, was horrifying. The phrase death by fashion wasn't metaphorical. You glance at her gown again and imagine how easily it could ignite. You quickly change the subject. Do you often entertain at night? Oh yes, she says with a smile. We have a small gathering later. Some friends from the neighborhood. A bit of music, nothing too grand. You can't help but feel a pang of curiosity. What does a Victorian evening party really look like? She notices. You'll join us, of course. A few hours later, the parlor transforms. The furniture shifts slightly, chairs drawn in a semicircle, lamps turned low. The pianoforte gleams in the corner, ready for its performance. The air feels warmer now, filled with a low murmur of voices and the faint scent of perfume and tobacco. You take a seat near the back, watching as guests arrive. Men in tailcoats, women in silks that shimmer like candlelight itself. Every gesture is measured, every word deliberate. You can tell who outranks whom by the angle of a nod or the degree of a smile. It's not conversation. It's choreography. The host, the master of the house, stands by the mantel, pipe in hand. He looks every inch the Victorian gentleman, self-possessed and faintly bored. His smoke curls lazily toward the ceiling, adding another layer of haze to the already heavy air. You take a cautious breath. There it is again. The chemical tang of gas and coal. The house breathes in smoke the way modern homes breathe in silence. The lady takes her place at the piano, her posture perfect, despite the corset you know must be waging war on her ribs. Her fingers hover over the keys for a moment, then descend gracefully. The first notes fill the room, soft, mournful, beautiful. The melody swells and dips like the sighing of the house itself. You close your eyes for a moment, letting the sound carry you somewhere beyond the gaslit haze. When you open them again, the room seems smaller, warmer. The flickering light plays tricks on your eyes, making the wallpaper shimmer like water. For a second, you think you see movement. A shadow that isn't attached to anyone. Then it's gone. You remind yourself that Victorian houses were full of drafts, not ghosts. Probably, the music ends to polite applause. The lady smiles faintly, cheeks flushed. Her husband claps twice. Exactly twice. The sound of approval measured in social correctness. After the music comes conversation. Someone mentions the latest exhibition at the Royal Academy. Another speaks of a new book by Charles Dickens. Rather too sentimental, but the masses adore it. A third, a portly man with mutton, chopped whiskers, launches into a passionate rant about railway timetables. You sip your tea, always tea, never wine, and watch the small rituals unfold. Every word, every laugh, feels rehearsed. This isn't relaxation. It's theatre. Victorians were masters of appearance. Even their leisure was a form of labour. Maintaining composure, showcasing civility, pretending that everything was under control. But beneath the laughter, you can feel it exhaustion. The weight of corsets, of rules, of invisible expectations. The gaslight hums faintly overhead, and for a moment you wonder how many of these faces hide headaches, faintness, or quiet despair behind polite smiles. A servant enters to refill cups. No one looks at her. She moves like part of the furniture, necessary but unseen. Her shadow passes over you, and you catch her expression for just a heartbeat blank, tired patient. You think of how long her day must have been. How much longer it still has to go. As the evening winds down, the guests begin to leave in a flurry of polite goodnights and rustling skirts. The lady's smile remains fixed until the last hat disappears through the door. Then, just for a second, it falters. She exhales, almost a sigh. Well, she murmurs. Another successful evening. You nod. Do you ever get tired of it? She blinks, then smiles again, but it's softer now. Oh, constantly. But one must be seen to enjoy it. Her husband clears his throat. Quite right. Appearances, my dear. And with that, he disappears into the study, the door closing with finality. You're left with the lingering hum of gaslight and the faint echo of music that feels too sad to have been called entertainment. The lady stands for a long moment, staring at the pianoforte. "Sometimes," she says quietly, "I miss the dark." You're not sure what she means, but as the lamps hiss quietly and the shadows pool in the corners, you begin to understand. The house feels heavier now, almost suffocating in its civility. You excuse yourself, stepping into the hallway where the air is marginally clearer. You pause beneath another lamp. Its flame flutters weakly, casting double shadows across the wall. You tilt your head and listen. There it is again, that faint hiss. You wonder if you should open a window, but they're sealed tight for warmth. So you breathe carefully, hoping the night passes without explosion or asphyxiation. Congratulations, you think to yourself with grim humor. You've survived the Victorian evening party. Smoke, etiquette, and all. But the night isn't over yet. Not even close. It's past midnight now, and the house has quieted, but not gone still. The grand old structure seems to sigh as it settles into the deeper hours, the way old ships creak after a long voyage. Somewhere in the walls, water pipes murmur and tick. The faint odor of gas still lingers, mixed with the musk of coal, and something older, something damp. You should sleep, but curiosity, or perhaps self-preservation, keeps you awake. You've seen how the Victorians live, how they eat, how they pretend to rest. But what happens in the hours when civility drops its mask? You light a candle. The room fills with that familiar waxy glow, softer and safer than the gaslight's hiss. The bed is huge, but the mattress feels more like a sack of lumpy hay. The blanket is heavy, far too heavy, and the air beneath it becomes thick and damp within minutes. You toss it aside, shivering instead. There's no radiator to hum you to sleep, no comforting electric hum. Just silence, broken by the far-off chime of a clock that seems to toll directly into your bones. The night feels endless. You hear footsteps in the hallway. Slow, measured, deliberate. You freeze, every instinct prickling. Then you remember the servants. They're still awake. Of course they are. Victorian households didn't truly rest. They merely shifted gears. The family retired upstairs, while the staff's night shift began. Coal to be tended, embers to be banked, boots to be cleaned, fires to be relit for the morning. The engine of domestic respectability never stopped running. You slip into the hallway, candle in hand. The flame quivers with each draft. Below stairs, the world looks entirely different. The gleaming corridors of the upper floors give way to low ceilings, cracked tiles, and air that smells faintly of soap and ash. A servant passes you with a stack of linens, her eyes wide with surprise to see a guest wandering here. "Beg pardon, sir," she whispers, curtsying before hurrying away. You follow her path to a cramped kitchen, where a few maids are gathered around a dying fire, scrubbing pots until their hands are raw and red. Their movements are mechanical. No chatter, no laughter, just endurance. One of them, perhaps braver than the rest, looks up at you. Her accent is thick, her tone wary but polite. "Couldn't sleep, sir?" You shake your head. "No. You?" She almost smiles. "Haven't since Michaelmas." The others chuckle faintly, though there's no real humor in it. You realize with a quiet H that these women have likely been awake since before dawn. When the family rests, they toil. When the family wakes, they serve again. You ask, "When do you stop?" She shrugs. "When there's nothing left to clean," which isn't often. In one corner, an older maid tends to the coals, her eyes half closed from exhaustion. Another yawns so hard her jaw pops, then catches herself, straightens, and returns to scrubbing. Even their fatigue must be disciplined. A faint rattle echoes from the scullery, a door that doesn't quite fit its frame. You catch a glimpse of a rat darting past, its slick body vanishing into the dark. No one reacts. It's a regular guest, clearly. You try not to imagine the unseen colonies beneath the floorboards. The air down here is damp, warm, and close. You can feel the weight of it in your lungs. The candle flickers again. You almost wish for the hiss of gaslight just to break the stillness. A young scullery maid, barely 15, pauses to rub her hands together, fingers swollen from cold water. "It's better than the mill," she mutters softly. You turn to her. "You worked in a mill," she nods. "Till the smoke made me cough blood. They said service works cleaner." You glance at the black suit embedded in her cuticles, the chapped skin, the red eyes. Cleaner is relative. Suddenly, a bell rings from upstairs. Sharp, metallic, urgent. All of them freeze. Then, like clockwork, they spring into action. One grabs her apron. Another snatches a tray. The hierarchy of sound bells for each room, each tone corresponding to a master's need. It's 19:40 in the morning. Someone upstairs wants tea. The head maid nods toward the stairs. "Go, Elsie." The girl scurries off, hair escaping her cap. You watch her vanish into the darkness above, carrying her exhaustion like a second shadow. The older maid sighs. "You see, sir, they never stop ringing." Her words linger, as much metaphor as complaint. You return to your room eventually, your mind buzzing. You think of the perfect poise upstairs, the polished manners, the calm composure, and the unseen army that sustains it. Every cup of tea, every clean collar, every gracious evening rests on the shoulders of those who will never be invited to sit. You lie down again, candle guttering beside you. The sheets smell faintly of starch and smoke. Somewhere beneath your floorboards, someone coughs, long and dry. The sound doesn't stop for a while. When it does, the silence feels heavier than before. You close your eyes, hoping for rest, but sleep doesn't come easily in a house that never truly sleeps. The faint ticking of the hall clock counts the minutes, relentless as progress itself. You wonder, briefly, how many lives were worn out so others could dream comfortably. And as the last of the candle melts, plunging the room into velvet dark, you realize something chilling. You're not afraid of the ghosts. You're afraid of the living. Dawn drags its pale light over the rooftops of London like a reluctant sigh. You're still half awake, half alive, lying in a bed that feels as though it swallowed you whole. When you finally rise, your body aches from the cold, your eyes sting from coal dust, and your throat burns as though you've spent the night inhaling chimney soot, which, to be fair, you probably have. The faint clatter of plates echoes through the floorboards. The smell of food reaches you, a comforting thought, until the memory of last night's kitchen returns. You decide to face breakfast anyway, driven by the simple human urge to eat something that isn't imaginary. Downstairs, the house has come back to life. Gas lamps flicker, kettles hiss, and somewhere a maid hums softly under her breath, steady as clockwork. The dining room gleams with the kind of precision only exhaustion can produce. Fresh linens, polished silverware, porcelain plates patterned with faded blue flowers. Breakfast looks beautiful, at first. Thick slices of bread, butter glistening on its surface, eggs, slightly grey around the edges, and ham that smells suspiciously metallic. You take a tentative bite. The butter tastes faintly of soap. The ham tastes faintly of regret. Victorians prided themselves on appearances, not necessarily on hygiene. Food preservation, after all, was a creative exercise. Iceboxes barely worked, meat sat for days, milk soared before noon. But with enough salt, vinegar, or imagination, almost anything could be fresh. You chew bravely. Historians still argue whether the Victorians actually knew how dangerous their food practices were, or if denial was part of the culture. After all, acknowledging decay wasn't very elegant. If it looked fine under candlelight, it was fine. You try not to think about the wallpaper as you eat. That vivid green hue along the dining room walls. It's striking, luxurious. almost alive. It should be, it's laced with arsenic. The pigment, known as Scheele's green, was one of the 19th century's favorite colors. Rich households adored it. Unfortunately, when combined with humidity, it slowly released arsenic vapors into the air. You glance around. Everyone else is eating calmly, unaware, or unwilling to be aware. Even your tea feels untrustworthy. The porcelain cup, though delicate and pretty, may have been glazed with lead. The sugar cubes gleam like little jewels, imported luxuries paid for by unseen suffering on distant plantations. You sip anyway, because pretending everything's fine seems to be the unofficial rule of the era. By the time dinner rolls around, you've given up on modern instincts entirely. The table stretches long as a ship's deck, laid out for half a dozen courses. Candles flicker in tall silver holders, shadows dancing across portraits of dead relatives who seem to be judging your posture. A servant ladles soup into your bowl. It's thick and creamy, dotted with something you hope is parsley. It smells faintly of milk, spoiled milk. You swirl it, watching the sheen on the surface. Victorian kitchens didn't refrigerate dairy. They cooled things with blocks of ice harvested from lakes and rivers, if you were wealthy enough to afford them. If not, well, you simply ate fast and hoped for the best. Still, the dining ritual carries on like theatre. Every gesture is deliberate. Fork in the left hand, knife in the right. Napkin folded just so. Speak only when spoken to. Laugh modestly. Never show hunger or emotion, or curiosity about where your food actually came from. One of the guests launches into a story about attending a grand dinner with Queen Victoria's cousin, ending with an anecdote about a pudding that exploded. Everyone chuckles politely. You try to join in, but your throat tightens as the air thickens with candle smoke and something far more sinister. Gas. Yes, that faint hiss isn't your imagination. Early gas fittings were notoriously leaky. Carbon monoxide seeped silently into rooms just like this one. Dinner by candlelight could easily become death by dinner. You glance at the nearest flame. It trembles. You decide to take smaller breaths. And then there's the water. You pour yourself a glass, watching it glint in the dim light. It's cloudy, tinged yellow. The Victorians pulled their drinking water straight from the Thames, a river that doubled as the city's open sewer. Boiling helped, sometimes. Other times, it just made the bacteria more determined. Water's not for drinking. A gentleman beside you chuckles, swirling his brandy. That's what wine's for. You nod weakly. It's hard to enjoy fine dining when you know every sip could come with a side of dysentery. Between courses, the conversation shifts toward progress. The marvels of science and technology. Someone mentions the marvel of luminous paint, which, ironically, also contained radium. Another praises the beauty of Paris green dresses, which were as deadly as the wallpaper. You realize with a grim sort of amusement that the Victorians were slowly poisoning themselves in pursuit of refinement. You glance around the table again. The women's cheeks glow faintly pink. Rouge, perhaps, or arsenic wafers, another popular beauty product of the time. The irony is staggering. You start to cough. Bit of a chill. Someone asks. You nod, dabbing your lips with the napkin. It leaves a faint reddish smear. You hope it's just the soup. A servant refills your plate, his face expressionless. You notice his hands, cracked and red, fingertips bandaged. Burns from handling hot irons and scalding pots, perhaps. His uniform is spotless, but his exhaustion radiates like heat. For a moment, your eyes meet. He looks away immediately. You wonder how many of his kind have vanished from the record entirely. Erased by class, by service, by silence. History remembers the hosts, not the hands that made the meal. Dessert arrives, a magnificent pudding crowned with cream and candied fruit. It wobbles proudly, a gelatin miracle. You take a cautious spoonful. It's heavy, rich, cloying, probably preserved with borax. You push the plate away. As the candles burn lower, the conversation drifts toward politics, morality, empire. The men speak with authority about lands they'll never see. The women smile and sip politely, feigning interest. You sit back, letting the room blur at the edges. The warmth is stifling now, the air thick. You can almost taste the chemicals, the smoke, the quiet desperation hidden beneath the silver and lace. Historians still debate whether Victorian domestic grandeur was genuine or a mask for decay. Perhaps it was both. A world obsessed with appearances, terrified of rot, and yet built entirely upon it. Your vision swims slightly. The laughter around you seems to echo from far away. Maybe it's the gas leak. Or maybe it's the weight of pretending everything's fine when nothing is. You excuse yourself, rising unsteadily. As you step into the hallway, the house exhales another long sigh, as though acknowledging the performance has ended. The silence that follows feels heavier than any prayer. You drift into the drawing room, trying to steady your lungs and thoughts alike. The air here is dense with perfume and polish. The faint sweetness of beeswax layered over something metallic. Perhaps that lingering gas leak you'd rather not name. Plush velvet sofas, gilt-framed mirrors, and embroidered footstools beckon you to relax. But comfort, you quickly learn, is never effortless in a Victorian house. This is the hour of evening amusements. When propriety dons its final costume of the day, you sink into a stiff armchair and instantly feel like you've offended the furniture. A servant pours wine rich, dark, slightly dusty, and the conversation resumes with the same choreographed rhythm as the dinner table. The women cluster near the piano, lace gloves folded neatly in their laps. The men hover by the fireplace, discussing stocks, colonies, and the inevitability of progress. You, the outsider, hover somewhere in between, too modern to blend in, too polite to flee. Someone strikes a piano key. The sound rings through the room, brittle and pure. A young woman begins to play. A gentle nocturne, the kind that drifts like candle smoke. Her hands move with precision, her expression calm. But you can see the tension in her shoulders, the slight tremor in her wrist. This is not joy, it's duty disguised as art. You murmur a compliment when the piece ends. She smiles, but her eyes don't. One must always keep one's fingers occupied, she says quietly, lest the mind wander where it shouldn't. A few people laugh, thinking it a joke. You're not sure it is. Victorian evenings were performances as much as any stage play. Music, parlor games, polite debate, all tools to keep minds and bodies properly restrained. True leisure was suspect, even dangerous. Too much laughter might suggest looseness, too much silence, melancholy. Moderation was moral. You glance at the clock. It's not yet 10, but it feels like midnight. The gas lights hum overhead. The fire pops occasionally, sending a spray of sparks that die before touching the hearth rug. The wallpaper's sheen glows, faintly green, under the lamps. Someone proposes a round of charades. You join reluctantly. The theme is famous inventions. A guest mimes cranking a wheel. Another pantomimes telegraph wires. You guess. Steam engine. Too quickly. Drawing good. Natured groans. They move on. It's harmless fun. Yet each laugh feels carefully measured. Each jest weighed for propriety before it's released. The talk drifts toward morality, as it so often does. A clergyman at the far end of the room expounds on the dangers of female education, while a gentleman in a waistcoat nods gravely. You suppress a sigh. Historians still argue whether Victorian moral codes truly reflected public virtue or simply social anxiety polished to a mirror shine. The gap between behavior and belief was vast. Beneath the corsets and catechisms, rebellion simmered quietly. You feel it in the air now, the subtle tension, the hunger for something unspoken. The woman at the piano plays a minor chord and lets it linger too long, almost scandalous in its dissonance. The clergyman frowns. She smiles faintly, then resumes a safer tune. Someone brings in a new parlor game. Scientific. Curiosity involving static electricity. A small brass disc and a hand crank. The Voltaic amusement, they call it. You're invited to try it. You place your hands on the disc as instructed. The gentleman turns the crank, and a sharp tingle races up your arms. Everyone laughs when you flinch. "Electricity!" he declares proudly. The future of mankind. If it doesn't kill us first. You manage a chuckle, though your fingertips still sting. Progress is intoxicating in this world, yet always tinged with unease. Every modern miracle hides a menace. The lamps, the dyes, the medicines, the machines. All ingenious, all deadly in their infancy. The Victorians were pioneers, yes, but also perpetual test subjects in their own experiments. The laughter fades. The evening stretches on. Someone begins to read poetry aloud, voice smooth and measured, Tennyson, perhaps, or Browning. You half listen, lulled by rhythm rather than meaning. The words wash over you, grand, tragic yearning. You glance toward the windows, beyond the curtains. Fog presses against the glass like breath on a mirror. The city outside is hushed, smothered under coal and mist. Only the occasional clatter of a carriage wheel cuts through the muffled dark. Your eyelids grow heavy, but not from sleepiness, more from the sheer weight of civility. You envy the servants, who at least are allowed exhaustion. Here, fatigue must be hidden behind pleasant smiles and conversational flourishes. A woman near you leans in. Do you play an instrument? You shake your head. She says, with polite disappointment. A pity. It refines the spirit. They say, you consider replying that your spirit might prefer central heating. You think better of it. Instead, you ask what people do for fun when there's no company to impress. She blinks, as though the question itself is improper. Fun, she repeats, tasting the word like an unfamiliar spice. That's when you realize in this house, joy is rationed like sugar. By 11, the atmosphere begins to thin. Guests rise, offering formal goodnights. The servants glide in to collect glasses and clear plates, their movements silent, invisible. Someone remarks on the beauty of the moonlight. Someone else complains about the fog. The conversation dissolves like smoke. You linger for a moment, reluctant to return to your freezing room. The fire has burned low, and the shadows stretch longer now, less comforting. As the last guest departs, the host claps a hand on your shoulder. Fine evening, wasn't it? Civilized company is the finest balm for the mind. You smile faintly. That certainly leaves an impression. He nods, oblivious to irony, and bids you good night. When the door shuts behind him, the silence feels startlingly intimate. The ground room, stripped of laughter, becomes eerie in its perfection. Every object gleams, every surface reflects. Yet somehow it feels less alive than it did an hour ago. The house seems to hum faintly. A sound you can't quite place. Perhaps it's the gas again. Perhaps it's just the echo of all the effort it takes to maintain decorum. You take one last look around, before heading toward the corridor. A faint impression lingers in the air. Perfume, smoke, and something that smells almost like loneliness. For all its grandeur, this house feels hollow, as though the very walls are wary from pretending. And somewhere deep down, so are you. You awaken before dawn again. Though awaken might be generous. It's more like you simply stop lying still, aware that the mattress has pressed its lumpy memory into your back, and that sleep, in this century, is as rare as clean air. The house is already murmuring below. You rise, pull on the same half-damp clothes, and drift toward the lower floors, following the sound of metal and motion. The grand staircase you descended last night is silent, but the narrow servants' passage beside it hums like a hidden artery. Down here, it's a different world. The ceilings shrink, the walls close in, and the air smells of starch, steam, and lie. You duck beneath a wooden beam and step into the scullery, where the day's work has already begun. A laundress is wrestling boiling linens out of a copper tub with a wooden paddle. Steam curls around her face like fog. Her arms are corded with muscle from years of this routine. Nearby, another woman scrubs a pile of collars until the fabric squeaks. Her hands are raw and cracked. She doesn't even flinch anymore. You nod awkwardly. Morning. She glances up, startled. Not for us it isn't, she mutters, half smiling. We've been at it since 2. Victorian households, you learn, never truly slept. Servants rose hours before the family to rekindle fires, polish brass, and prepare breakfasts they'd never taste. If they finished their duties early, they found more. Idleness was considered sinful below stairs too. A coal boy, no older than 10, shuffles past carrying a bucket almost as big as he is. His face is a perfect charcoal sketch, his eyes rimmed red. He sneezes once, twice, then keeps moving. You watch him disappear into the dim corridor, where suit and duty merge into the same color. A tall man in a stained apron wipes his brow with a sleeve. The butler, perhaps, or the cook's assistant. He's directing a younger maid on how to slice bread evenly, each movement precise. There's no chatter, no laughter, only rhythm. You realize this kitchen is less like a home and more like a machine. Historians still argue whether Victorian servants were invisible by design or by necessity. The rich liked to believe domestic order ran on grace and gratitude. In truth, it ran on exhaustion. You watch as one of the maids irons a mountain of linen with a heavy cast. Iron press heated directly on the stove. The handle glows faintly red. She wraps a cloth around her hand to avoid burns. You wince when she slips and hisses under her breath, a blister already forming. No one stops. Every surface down here tells the same story, scrubbed to a shine that's almost tragic. Even the floors gleam, though the water used to wash them runs brown. There's no time to dwell on illness or ache. The rhythm of work is both punishment and salvation. A bell rings sharply. Everyone freezes for half a heartbeat, listening. Then the butler says, "Breakfast room." The youngest maid sets down her broom and darts upstairs, apron fluttering. She moves with the silent urgency of someone who has learned the value of vanishing quickly. The older servants resume their tasks. The clatter resumes. You drift toward the pantry, where shelves groan under the weight of tins, spices, and jars. A faint mildew smell curls through the air. The shelves are labeled in a neat hand FOUR, SOP, QIF, DRIPNGFET. Each jar represents endless hours of unseen labor, purchases logged, deliveries checked, storage rotated, all under the watchful eye of someone above. The house itself feels alive down here, breathing through pipes and vents, whispering orders through bells and whistles. A sudden clang echoes from the coal chute, and the coal boy reappears, coughing. He dumps the bucket into the bin, black dust exploding in a cloud. "Sorry, miss," he wheezes to no one in particular. His nose drips black. You kneel beside him. "Do you ever get a day off?" He grins faintly, a soot-toothed smile. "Sunday, if the fires stay lit." He looks about 10, but his voice sounds much older. You want to say something comforting, but the words stick. Instead, you hand him a rag. He wipes his face and scurries off again, leaving a faint trail of footprints like ink stains across the floor. When breakfast begins upstairs, the servant's own meal happens down here. Bread crusts, weak tea, leftovers. They eat quickly, perched on stools, never sitting long enough to relax. Conversation is minimal, just enough to stay human. You sit among them for a moment, unnoticed. The bread tastes faintly of ash. The tea is more water than flavor, but there's something oddly grounding about it. Honest fatigue has its own dignity. The cook eyes you with suspicion. "You'll catch it from the master if he finds you here," she warns. You nod, though part of you thinks you'd rather risk that than another polite dinner. As the morning unfolds, the pace accelerates. Boots to polish, curtains to beat, chamber pots to empty. The laundry maid hauls dripping sheets out into the courtyard, where the air at least smells cleaner. Frost coats the cobblestones, making her footing precarious. She hums softly to herself. A hymn, maybe, or just a rhythm to keep her balance. You step outside too, watching your breath curl in the cold. The sky is the same grey as the coal dust, the same grey as the servants' uniforms. The faintest hint of dawn blushes at the horizon, a reminder that time still moves forward, even when every day feels identical. You think back to last night's laughter upstairs, the tinkling glasses and delicate jokes, and realize these two worlds share only walls, not reality. Historians sometimes call this the two nations, rich and poor, upstairs and down, both existing side by side yet utterly apart. One in candlelight, one in shadows. You turn as the butler passes by, his posture perfect despite his exhaustion. "Everything all right?" he asks politely, as though fatigue were treason. You hesitate, then say, "Do you ever wish you could stop?" He pauses, thinking. Stopping is for those who can afford it. Then he moves on. That single sentence lodges deep in your chest. By noon, the servants' hallway smells of polish and steam again. The coal boy's gone home to sleep for a few hours before returning. The maids are still at it. Their laughter thin but real now. Small defiance in an unending day. You climb the stairs again, back toward the genteel hush of the family rooms. The contrast hits you like a change in air pressure silence, perfume, symmetry. Somewhere below, a bell rings again. Another command. Another invisible movement. You stand in the quiet corridor and think of all the footsteps, all the breaths that make this illusion possible. You realize the house itself isn't haunted by ghosts. It's haunted by effort. You climb back into the world of carpets and chandeliers, where nothing smells like lye or steam, only lavender, beeswax, and faint decay. The hush feels thick, unnatural, as if the house itself is holding its breath. Somewhere below, you still hear the occasional thud or scrape from the servants. The heartbeat of the machine still running beneath polished floors. It's late afternoon now, and a strange fatigue presses down on you. The house seems different in this light, longer shadows, colder mirrors. Even the portraits on the walls appear more judgmental than before. You find yourself wandering down a hallway you don't remember seeing yesterday. The wallpaper is a deep olive green, patterned with twisting vines and tiny golden leaves. It glows faintly under the gaslight, and for a moment, you admire its craftsmanship, until you remember that some Victorian wallpapers were literally painted with arsenic pigment. You pull your hand away fast. The corridor narrows, then forks. A draft curls around your neck. You follow it, half curious, half dreading what's next. You pass a door slightly ajar. Inside, faint scratching. You pause. It stops. You lean closer. The scratching resumes rhythmic, like small claws against wood. You push the door open just a crack. Nothing but a dressing room. Faint light filtering through lace curtains, dust floating in slow motion. Then, a blur darts across the floor. You jump back, heart pounding. A rat vanishes behind a trunk, its tail disappearing like a shadow. For all their grandeur, Victorian homes were crawling with pests. Rats, mice, beetles, lice. They thrived in the warm, dusty corners between opulence and neglect. No disinfectants, no sealed floorboards, no modern plumbing to carry waste away. Everything smelled faintly of survival. You close the door and move on, shoes creaking on the boards. Further down the hall, another door sits closed, but this one has a faint tremor in the handle, as if someone just released it. You wait. Nothing. You knock softly. No reply. The air grows colder. The gaslights flicker. You tell yourself it's just pressure in the pipes, but your gut disagrees. Then comes the noise. Not the scurry of rats this time. Something heavier. A soft thud. Then another. like footsteps from above, or inside the walls. The Victorian house, you realize, never stops settling, never stops whispering. You move toward the grand staircase, and the air changes again. There's a sweet chemical tang, the gaslight. A leak somewhere maybe. You cover your mouth, breathing shallowly. Countless Victorians died this way, suffocated by the invisible hand of their own technology. A single hiss in the night could end a household. You find the valve, twist it shut. The flame steadies. Your pulse slows. And then the whisper returns. It's faint like a sigh. 2 syllables, maybe 3. Could be the draft, could be the house speaking in its sleep. You laugh nervously to yourself. You're tired. You haven't had proper sleep or food. You're becoming one of those late Victorian ghost hunters who saw phantoms in every curtain fold. Still, curiosity wins. You follow the sound toward the back of the house, past framed landscapes and forgotten rooms. There's a door at the end. Unpainted. Plain, unlike the rest. It opens onto a narrow staircase spiraling upward. The servants' attic. The air up here is brittle with cold. Dust motes hang suspended, undisturbed for years. A few thin beds line the walls, blankets folded military tight. The roof slopes so low you have to crouch to move. You sit on one of the beds. The straw mattress sighs. You imagine the girls who slept here, exhausted, their hands blistered and raw from scouring floors. The only warmth came from each other and the faint hum of the house below. A whisper again, this time unmistakable. You freeze. It's not words, exactly. More like a breath drawn through the teeth. You turn slowly. The farthest bed is unmade. And there, just beside it, something stirs. You squint. The light from your candle barely reaches. You step closer, each board creaking in protest. A shape moves under the blanket, small, shivering. You whisper, "Hello." No reply. You reach out and lift the edge of the blanket. Nothing but a bundle of rags. You exhale shakily. But beneath them, tucked against the wall, a small handprint in suit. Recent. You back away slowly. Downstairs, a clock chimes 6. The sound cuts through the silence like a blade. You almost laugh with relief, though your heart is still hammering. Victorian houses had layers like sediment, each floor a different century of dust and memory. You suddenly feel them all pressing down at once: the coal soot, the arsenic paint, the damp wood, the 1,000 unspoken lives. You hurry downstairs, nearly tripping in your haste. The air feels warmer now, heavier, as if the house disapproves of your wandering. You find the drawing room, the same one that hosted laughter last night. The candles are half burned, the scent of wax strong. You collapse into a chair and close your eyes. The whispering fades, replaced by the crackle of the fire. Maybe it was imagination after all. Maybe the house isn't haunted, just tired. You glance at the portraits again. The painted eyes don't move, but they don't need to. Their silence is enough. And in that silence, you understand something strange. Victorian houses don't need ghosts. They are the ghosts, built from every cough, every sigh, every unspoken life lived beneath their roofs. Outside, night falls again, slow and deliberate. Somewhere below, a bell rings. And the whisper starts once more. You wake before dawn. Or maybe you never truly slept. The house is blue with early light. Quiet but not peaceful. Every corner seems to hum faintly, a low vibration beneath the floorboards. The faint smell of coal smoke curls into your room again, the same sickly perfume that has followed you since your first night here. You sit up, rubbing your eyes. The air feels heavier today. Moisture beads on the inside of the window panes. Condensation slides down the glass in slow, crooked trails. Somewhere outside, a horse snorts and stamps against the cold. You should leave. But curiosity, that persistent Victorian disease, keeps you here. You dress quickly, fumbling with stiff fabric and absurdly small buttons. Even putting on clothes in this century feels like work. The waistcoat pinches. The collar nearly chokes you. You can't help but mutter. No wonder they were all cranky. The door opens with its familiar groan. The hallway beyond looks longer today, the wallpaper a little more faded. You could swear it wasn't peeling like that yesterday. Maybe that's just how these houses are. Always shifting slightly, aging in real time. You follow the faint sounds of movement to the breakfast room. The staff has already cleared away the remains of an early meal. Cold toast, congealed bacon grease, and an abandoned cup of tea sit on a tray by the door. The house's lady, pale, stern, wrapped in layers of lace and mourning grey, is already there, seated by the window with her embroidery. She looks up as you enter, her gaze sharp but unreadable. She says softly. Our visitor survives another night. You try to smile. Barely. She doesn't return it. Instead, she gestures to the chair opposite hers. Sit. You look pale. You do as told, lowering yourself carefully. The chair squeaks under your weight, perhaps protesting your intrusion. You must forgive the noise last night, she says, not looking up from her needlework. Old houses have their ways. You hesitate. Do you hear them too? Her hand stills. The whispers. You nod. She sighs, threading her needle again. My husband used to say it was the air in the pipes. Then again, he said many things before the fever took him. You swallow. The candlelight from last night flickers in your memory, the unmade bed in the attic, the suit marked handprint. I sometimes think, she continues, that houses like this remember more than we do. Every argument, every secret. All trapped in the plaster, waiting for the right silence to speak again. You glance toward the hallway, where the faintest echo of footsteps drifts by, soft and uneven, as though someone is pacing barefoot. The lady doesn't flinch. Historians still argue whether spirits linger out of sorrow or habit, she murmurs. But I've lived long enough to believe it's simply routine. The dead are creatures of habit, after all. You laugh nervously, but she doesn't. A clock chimes 8. The house exhales, and with it, life resumes. Somewhere, a maid coughs. The sound carries strangely, reverberating through the walls. You excuse yourself and leave the breakfast room. The house feels different now. Not haunted, exactly, but saturated. Like it's been waiting for you to notice. The floors creak not from weight but from memory. The mirrors are smudged not by dust but by years of reflection. You pass the parlour, the same one where polite laughter once hid discomfort. The piano lid is half open. You brush a key, one note, flat and hollow. It rings too long. You pause. In the corner, a child's doll sits propped against the wall, its porcelain face cracked, one glass eye missing. It wasn't there yesterday. You bend down to look closer. The missing eye socket stares back at you, reflecting a sliver of light. You tell yourself someone moved it. Maybe a servant tidied it. Maybe. The air grows colder again. You head for the library, one room you haven't explored yet. The door opens to a wave of old paper scent, must, dust, and something faintly metallic. Books line every wall, some bound in leather, others fraying at the edges. A globe stands in one corner, the sea's faded green, the continents cracked like old paint. You trail a finger along the spines. Titles half, legible: the etiquette of the drawing room, domestic remedies for the household, the dangers of modern invention. You can't help but smile at that last one. You pull a volume down and open it. The pages tremble slightly in the draft, whispering against each other. Inside the cover, written in elegant penmanship, Henry Wetlock, 1872. For the preservation of sanity, you run your thumb over the name. The ink has bled slightly into the paper, as though the words themselves were trying to escape. Then something catches your eye. A folded note, tucked between pages 113 and 114. You unfold it carefully. If you hear the clock strike 13, leave at once. Your pulse stutters. You glance at the clock on the mantel. 8:45. You tell yourself it's a joke, an old superstition scribbled by some nervous Victorian reader. You slide the note back where it came from. But the words follow you, echoing through the hall as you move. 9 o'clock. 10. The day crawls by. The house breathes around you, doors settling, windows sighing. At 11, you stand by the staircase again, candle in hand, staring upward. The light from below flickers on the walls, stretching your shadow like something separate, something alive. You can't help but wonder if the house has been testing you all along, showing you its lungs, its heart, its ghosts. You wait for the next chime, 12 strokes. Then silence. You breathe. Relief floods you, but it's short-lived. Because somewhere deep within the walls, faint but deliberate, comes one more sound. 13. The air freezes. Every candle in the corridor flutters. The silence after that final chime is absolute, so deep you can hear the blood in your ears. The floor beneath your feet seems to shift, the boards flexing ever so slightly. The portraits tilt, or maybe it's the light. You step backward. One careful step, then another, and from upstairs, a door creaks open. You don't wait to see which. You turn and run, the echo of your footsteps swallowed by the velvet dark. You don't stop running until you reach the grand front door, and even then, your hand hesitates on the latch. The house is utterly still now, too still, as though that extra chime had snuffed out all motion. The gas lights have dimmed to a weak, trembling glow. The air tastes faintly metallic, like rain about to fall. You pull at the latch. It doesn't budge. You twist harder. Nothing. The old brass handle seems to resist, warm beneath your fingers, as though the house itself refuses to let you go. You step back, chest rising and falling, eyes darting across the hallway. Every doorway looks the same. Too many, all slightly crooked, like the walls have shifted while you weren't looking. You call out, "Hello." Your voice feels small in the high, ceilinged space. The echo comes back a second later, warped and late, as if the house had to think before answering. You swallow. There must be another way out. You move toward the servants' passage again, your feet making soft sounds against the rug. The air down there is colder. Your candle flickers low, the flame shrinking each time you turn a corner. The hallways feel endless now, looping, repeating. You pass the same wooden bucket twice. Then you hear it, whispering again, only louder this time, overlapping voices that sound like sighs and scraps of words. You freeze, straining to make them out. The bell, 13. Leave, before the light. The door won't open, not yet. Your throat tightens. You press forward anyway. The scullery is empty, the hearth long cold. Pots and rags lie scattered, as though dropped mid-task. You glance at the back door. It's half open. A single breath of cold morning air snakes through the crack. You move toward it. Fast, almost running. But as you reach for the handle, the wind slams the door shut. Hard. The sound rattles the shelves. Your candle goes out. Darkness. You stand perfectly still, hearing only your own heartbeat and the faintest sound of something dripping nearby. You reach for the matches in your pocket, fumbling them out. The first one snaps. The second lights, flaring bright. Then you see it. A handprint on the inside of the door. Black, sooty, small. The same as the one you found in the attic. The match burns low, hot against your fingers. You drop it, and the dark returns like a wave. You try the door again, shoulder braced. It won't move. The frame feels warped, or maybe the hinges have frozen. You step back, trembling slightly, your breath fogging the air. "Come on," you mutter. "It's just wood." You throw your weight against it, once, twice. On the third shove, it bursts open, spilling a rush of cold, damp air into the room. You stumble outside, gasping like someone surfacing from deep water. The sky is pale grey, dawn breaking behind a wall of fog. The garden stretches before you. Wild now untrimmed, the hedges like claws. Every surface glistens with dew. You turn back toward the house. For a heartbeat, you think you see a curtain move in one of the upstairs windows. Then it stills. You should leave. You know you should. But the strange magnetism that's kept you here all along pulls once more. You take a step forward, back toward the threshold. The smell of the place clings to you. Coal smoke, gas mildew, and something faintly sweet, like decaying flowers. You look up. The roofline cuts a sharp silhouette against the mist, every chimney leaning slightly, as if whispering secrets to one another. Why can't I stop? You murmur. And then you remember the note in the book. If you hear the clock strike 13, leave at once. You did leave. But perhaps, at once, meant more than running outside. You glance toward the lane beyond the gate. It's empty. Not a soul in sight. No sound but the slow drip of water from the eaves. You walk toward the gate anyway, shoes sinking into damp soil. Halfway there, you pause. Something feels wrong. Not frightening, just off. The fog thickens behind you, swallowing the house piece by piece. But as it fades from view, another outline begins to form ahead, familiar, square, and unmistakable. You stop breathing. The same house, standing where the lane should be. Identical, down to the cracked chimney and the ivy-tangled walls. You turn back, and the one behind you is gone. The air grows colder again. You blink, trying to focus, but the fog has become almost solid. Every direction you look, the same silhouette waits. The same Victorian house repeating like a broken reflection, heart thudding. No, no, no. Then a bell tolls in the distance. 1, 2, 3. It keeps going. 4, 5, 6, 7. Each chime echoes from a different direction. You spin, disoriented, the sound bouncing through the fog. 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. And then, inevitably, 13. The sound crashes over you like thunder. The fog ripples. The houses flicker. Now 1, now 3, now none at all. You close your eyes. For a second, everything is quiet. When you open them again, you're standing in the entryway. Same wallpaper. Same chandeliers. Same faint smell of lavender and decay. The front door stands closed before you, smooth and warm to the touch. The latch no longer sticks. You could swear you left. But maybe you never did. Somewhere deep in the walls, the gaslight hisses softly. Patient, waiting. The portraits resume their silent vigil. Upstairs, a floorboard creaks. And beneath it all, the faintest whisper rises again. Welcome home. The whisper follows you up the staircase like breath on your neck. Soft, steady, almost kind. You grip the rail to steady yourself, but even the wood feels alive, pulsing faintly under your palm, as if the house itself has veins now. You move slowly, each step creaking like a heartbeat. Somewhere above, the faint chiming of porcelain. Perhaps the remnants of breakfast. But when you reach the landing, the air shifts. There's no trace of warmth, no smell of tea, no distant hum of servants. Only stillness. You pause outside your bedroom door. The handle is cold this time. Metal chilled through, like something left out in winter. You push it open. Inside, everything looks the same. The bed neatly made, the candle stub on the table, the window misted with condensation. But there's something wrong with the light. It filters through ashen grey, not the soft yellow of dawn. You walk toward the mirror. The glass is dull, rippling slightly, distorting your reflection just enough to make you uneasy. Your own eyes look tired, but not just tired. Older. There's soot on your collar, though you haven't been near the hearth. Just a dream. You murmur. Or gas fumes. But the mirror doesn't quite agree. As you lean closer, another reflection appears behind you. Faint, blurred, a silhouette. A woman's shape. You turn quickly. Nothing there. The reflection lingers a moment longer, then fades. You exhale, forcing yourself to move. This house has tricks, drafts, echoes, warped glass. You've seen worse in old hotels. Still, a chill has settled in your bones. You can feel the faint vibration of something unseen, as though the air hums in tune with your heartbeat. You sit on the edge of the bed, running a hand over the blanket. It's still warm. Someone's been here. A knock breaks the silence. 3 sharp raps at the door. You freeze. Hello. No reply. You stand, cross the room, and open it. The hallway is empty, stretching on longer than it should. Then, from below, a single sound. The faint clatter of teacups. You descend cautiously, hand tracing the banister. The grand hall seems taller than before, darker too. The portraits stare down, their eyes slightly duller. The air smells faintly of scorched sugar and coal, the scent of breakfast long burned. In the dining room, the table is set. Silverware gleams, plates pristine, teapot steaming faintly. But there's no one in sight. You glance at the chairs. Each one has an indentation in the cushion, as if someone only just stood up. The silence thickens. A faint rustle behind you, fabric brushing wood. You turn slowly. There they are. The household, seated at the table once more. The master at the head, pale as candle wax. The lady beside him, still as her portrait. The maids, the butler, the coachman, all present, all silent. Their faces are colourless, eyes glassy. For a long moment, no one moves. Then the master lifts his teacup, gestures faintly toward the chair at the foot of the table. "Join us," he says. His voice sounds like paper tearing. You want to run, but your body doesn't listen. Your feet carry you forward. You sit. The chair is freezing. A cup is poured for you. The liquid black and glistening, smelling faintly of iron and sugar. You stare into it, and the surface ripples. Reflections form and vanish. Your face, then another, then none. The lady smiles faintly. "We do like visitors." You swallow hard. "What happened to you?" She tilts her head, considering. "The house keeps us." You glance around. The gaslights flickering in perfect rhythm. The clock above the mantel ticking with unnatural precision. You whisper. "You can't leave." Her smile widens, just enough to show the smallest crack along her cheek, like paint flaking. "Oh, we could. But then who would keep the house alive?" The master sets down his cup. The sound echoes too long. Every brick remembers. He murmurs. Every footstep, every breath. Then he looks directly at you, and now it remembers you. You shove back from the table. The chair topples. The sound breaks the stillness. And instantly, the room erupts in motion. The portraits rattle, the gaslights flare, and the faint hiss of escaping gas fills the air. You stumble toward the door, coughing, eyes watering. The smoke thickens, black and greasy. You can hear the servants' bells ringing all at once, a chaotic chorus. You reach the front door again. This time it opens easily, too easily. You tumble into cold air, collapsing onto the gravel path. When you look back, the windows glow with orange light. The house burns quietly, without crackling or roar, the flames moving like liquid silk. You stand, breath clouding in the mist, and take one last look. The roof caves slightly, the chimneys crumbling. Then, slowly, impossibly, the fire fades. When the smoke clears, the house stands whole again, untouched, waiting. You turn and walk away. This time you don't look back. The lane stretches before you, endless. Fog thick, but real. The air feels cleaner here. You keep walking until the sound of the bells fades completely. And when the morning sun finally breaks through, you realize something strange. Your hands are clean. Your clothes are fresh. You smell faintly of lavender and coal. But in your pocket, folded tight, is that same note. If you hear the clock strike 13, leave at once. Only now, there's a new line beneath it. Too late. And now, as you settle back into your own bed, soft mattress, clean air, maybe the gentle hum of a modern heater, the edges of the story begin to blur. The Victorian house, the suit, the whispers, all slipping into that slow fade between dream and memory. You breathe in. The air feels lighter now. The weight of coal smoke and candle wax lifts from your chest. Somewhere, a clock ticks. Steady, ordinary, reassuring. 12 strokes, no more. You think of the servants and their endless work. The polished silver. The gaslight's sigh. You think of how comfort always has a cost. How every quiet home hides its own small ghosts. Maybe not the haunting kind. Just the echoes of time. The traces of lives folded into the walls. The truth is, you did survive the Victorian house. Barely. But you brought something back with you. An awareness of how fragile warmth really is. How strange it is that silence can hum louder than noise. So, as your eyes grow heavy, let the last embers fade. Let the whispers sink into nothing. The world outside your room is simpler, safer, kinder. But still, you'll remember that extra chime, won't you? The one that meant you stayed too long. Now, breathe out. Let the shadows settle where they belong. In history, behind glass, in someone else's dream. Sleep well, traveler. Sweet dreams.